Something interesting about Jeremiah, the so-called weeping prophet, is that he's a type of the Messiah. So on the left there, you have a summary of Jeremiah's calling. So it says how God appointed him as a prophet to Israel and the nations to uproot and tear down the judgment, the bad time, and then to plant and build up the good times coming, the hope. The Lord stretched out his hand, touched my mouth. The Lord said to me, behold, I have put my words in your mouth. See, I have appointed you this day over the nations and over the kingdoms to pluck up and to break down, to destroy and to overthrow, to build and to plant. You will notice there are a few similarities with the Messiah, Jesus. Verse 9, I have put my words in your mouth. You can look at Deuteronomy 18. Moses talks about the prophet chosen from among Israel, and God will put his words in his mouth, like he did, of course, with Moses himself. And then you see the building up there to plant and so forth. Interesting comment from a book called The Prophecy of Isaiah. The phrase to plant is well established as a metaphor to begin anew or to set firmly in place. The servant is the point of origin of a new cosmic reality embracing heaven and earth. Jeremiah 1 verses 9 following was gifted with the Lord's word to plant kingdoms, but the servant will plant heavens, doing the creatorial work which the Bible reserves for God himself. So this has a lot of power, obviously, that God has invested him with. And the so-called suffering servant of Isaiah there on the right, and that's an image with some of the text throughout the so-called suffering servant cycle that begins really in Isaiah chapter 42 and ends in 54. Isaiah 51:16. Some translations render the Hebrew this way: I have put my words in your mouth. You see there the similarities. And have covered you with the shadow of my hand to establish the heavens, to plant, to build the earth, and to say to Zion, Jerusalem, you are my people. Also see Isaiah 49. So you see the similarities there with this so-called suffering servant, the so-called weeping prophet, Jeremiah. They both have the words of Yahweh, of God, the Father. They are the spokesmen of God. That is what the word prophet means in the Bible. That's how the Bible defines that role or office. And they're invested with creatorial power, the power to plant, to build, to establish even the heavens and earth. And of course, in reference to the messianic future figure who turns out to be Jesus, we will see how that will actually extend to the actual physical earth. Another commentary, the Word Biblical Commentary on that verse, says that it makes no sense if the verse refers to the original Genesis creation. In the other instances, God acts alone, using no agent. Here, the one he has hidden in the shadow of his hand is his agent. And it goes on to say, heavens and land here refers metaphorically to the totality of order in Palestine. Heaven means the broader overarching structure of the empire, while the word land is the political order in Palestine itself. So although it may sound like Isaiah 51:16 is a reference to the original Genesis creation, the point is that it's looking forward. By the way, a similar comparison can be made with Psalm 102, speaks of a future people, future generations, not looking back to Genesis. Smith, in his Isaiah commentary, the reference must be to the new heaven and earth, like Isaiah 65, the Messianic age when spiritual Zion becomes the center of the divine program. God's word established the original creation. The servant's word will usher in the new creation. God's people inhabit the new heavens and earth, the new world created by the servant. So then we have I think, better understanding now of one of the most difficult New Testament verses for people who do not believe Jesus is somehow God, especially the creator of all things, Genesis. So we read in Hebrews 1 using Anthony's translation paraphrase. But of the Son, he says, your throne, O God, is forever and ever. The scepter of uprightness is the scepter of your kingdom. You have loved uprightness and hated iniquity. Therefore, God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of gladness above your fellows. So this is the famous Psalm 45 reference, where this human Davidic figure, who turns out to be Jesus, is given the honorific title of God, as Jesus himself called the judges of Israel, by the way, gods. The Gospel of John chapter 10. You will note, obviously, that this little g God, which is the proper translation there, we believe, of Hebrews 1:8, that's because he has a God in verse 9. If you translate that capital G word in verse 8, you have a huge problem. And then here's the important point. And then again, this is about the Son, as we saw in verse 8. It has not changed. The addressee is the same. And you, Lord, that is the Son, in the beginning laid, remember those words? To plant, to build. So now the Lord Son here lays the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the works of your hands. I hope you can appreciate here the parallels between the human Son, Messiah, Jesus, and the so-called weeping prophet, the suffering servant. They have been invested, if you will, empowered as the supreme agents of the one God of Israel, the Father, to even plant, build, found the nations and the earth itself here, in the case of Jesus. And we must remember this, and this is quite a quote from a famous scholar called Brunner in his book Dogmatics. It's quite a statement. God alone is the creator. The Son is called simply and solely the mediator of the creation. In the New Testament, the Son, or Jesus Christ, is never called the creator. The Psalm quotation used in Hebrews 1:10 should not, again, not be used as an argument against the explicit doctrine of verse 2 in that chapter, where it says God through the Son, through whom he made the ages. In other words, everything that is. So through the Son, these things come to be. So that's quite a statement from Brunner, who was not obviously a non-Trinitarian, but he's just making a factual claim here regarding the biblical view of the one true creator, capital C, let's call him, and the difference with that and the builders that he, the God the Father, designates for his restoration, his great rebuilding of the world and the nations.